Does using different forms of meta or meta teams make you cheat? Why is it so looked down upon in the Storm community? And how does meta even start to begin with in a Storm game? Well, let's talk about that and so much more. What is going on, everyone? I am your host, Matt, and welcome back to my channel, Anime Fever. Today, I have in addition to our enthralling discussion videos where we break down, talk about, and answer every burning question that we could think of regarding the Naruto Storm series. And with that said, let's just get right into this one. First of all, we're going to need to establish a mutual understanding for what meta and a meta team even is. Now, the quote current meta is literally just any top tier strategy at any given time, whether that's a character's combo, the repeated use of an item or a move, or just some new tech that's overly powerful for whatever reason. And I keep saying in the moment because all of these things are subject to change upon DLC release, updates, or even hot patches. A meta character, on the other hand, is pretty much just any character with a lot of those similar attributes, as well as having some of the strongest buffs on the roster in that moment. So when you have a team that's comprised of a lot of these powerful attributes and advantages like that, well, I just dubbed them meta teams. I think it's pretty self-explanatory, but I just wanted to establish that baseline understanding of meta before we get into the real details. The origin of meta. The best example that I can give of how meta even occurs and starts in a Storm game to begin with is honestly before the game even releases. The short answer is that they just really don't balance the characters correctly, and they don't balance the characters for a myriad of reasons. And me of all people, I completely understand what you're thinking. In your head, you're like, oh, why would you not focus on your characters and developing them and their combos when it's literally a competitive fighting game and that's what you would want to do? Well, they don't consider this to be a competitive fighting game. They don't consider this game to be competitive at all. So that's answer number one. Obviously, when a Storm game releases, or is in pre-production, I should say, they have a finite amount of time and they have a limited budget to work with. So they have to allocate those two things properly in order to really get the most out of a Storm game for the fans, of course. So what ends up happening is because of the massive roster that Storm games have, it is a huge part of their promotion. It has probably one of the, if not the largest roster in a fighting game, period. They tend to sacrifice focusing on characters' combos and balancing those characters, especially older characters that have been on the roster for a longer period of time. And then they focus more on things like the story mode, the visual effects, the fluidity of how the games are, you know, the main kind of details like how many matches they're gonna have, the character switching, all that kind of stuff. They put way more focus into that stuff than actually rehauling a lot of the characters and balancing them. And they do that, like I said, for a myriad of reasons, but mainly just because they don't want to allocate that time and money into it. They would rather just copy and paste those characters into another game and then throw a little bit of spice on there with a couple new characters and call it a day. Another really big reason why this happens is because a lot of the developers just genuinely, and it sounds bad saying it, but I mean it in the most, respectful way I can, they're not as good at the game as a lot of the players who play this game and do consider this to be a competitive game. They're just not as good. So when they're testing the game, they're testing the characters, they feel balanced. They put them out because they're confident that they are balanced, and it turns out that they're really not. Once the characters get into the hands of much more experienced competitive players, they're able to take advantages of all the loopholes, the tech, and the advantages that the development team just can't do. A lot of these players also have a lot more time once the game's already released to play this game and take advantage of the loopholes and find the loopholes. They have a lot more time. A lot of these people have all day and all night to invest into playing this game and finding those little loopholes, which in my opinion is honestly why it is so much more. It is just that much more important for them to hire real players like they did with Storm 4 to test these games, because they are willing to put in this time and they are willing to put in the effort, and they'll even do it again after the game's been released. And trust me, they're very good at what they do. That being said, this is exactly why Storm 4 felt so much more polished than Storm Connections feels, even though visually Connections is just beautiful. CC2 said in an interview back in 2015 that they hired a lot of real players to help develop the fighting tech for Storm 4, and that they were more aware now and knew for sure that people were interested in the fighting mechanics and tech that came along with it than they had ever realized before. So when they made Storm 4, they were prioritizing the strategy in the development of the game. Storm Connections, unfortunately, they didn't have that resource. At least in my opinion, that's a very opinion-based thing. I don't think that they had the resource to do what they did with Storm 4. Anyway, because of this, upon launch, a few characters, or sometimes more than a few characters, usually end up being a little bit too powerful when played up or pit up against the rest of the characters. Following this, DLC will usually drop shortly after the launch of the game, maybe a month or so. And when a new character is introduced as DLC, typically everybody is excited, so they all flock to that character. That character is also not fully balanced yet compared to all the other characters, and because it's brand new, all the new tech, it's usually more powerful, hence the meta, and so on and so forth. And that is how the cycle of meta perpetually evolves in Storm games. It's just a perpetual cycle that evolves over time, and there is always going to be some form of meta. Okay, so that is the description of meta and how it evolves in a Storm game, but is it considered cheap to use, and why? I really do think that the easiest way to answer this question is to start out by just simply saying that not all meta is considered to be, quote, bad meta, or genuinely frowned upon. Not all meta is frowned upon. Some meta is actually looked at to be very skillful, and people will look up to you more as a skilled player if you choose to use certain meta. But with that said, the community does have a very fragile and sometimes what I consider and what a lot of people consider to be a toxic definition of what it means to take advantage of these imbalances or metas. The community has pretty much dubbed it, or I've dubbed it anyway, meta abuse. For those of you who don't want a long, dragged out answer, well, my flat out plain answer would be just absolutely not. I don't think that it's bad for people to use meta in a Storm game. My in-depth explanation, however, it genuinely cannot be so simple. My in-depth answer to that question depends on a few things. What makes you enjoy this game, or a Storm game in general? And does chasing the win ever seem to overshadow your ability to still enjoy the game? If you get to a point where you're not even having fun anymore, you're literally just using whatever team because you know it will almost guarantee you a win, and your only goal is to achieve as much BP as you possibly can, then you're probably approaching the point where people would consider you to be cheap. Probably, but not definitely. Don't be confused with a team that you just really enjoy. If you enjoy using a team and you're constantly winning, or you feel like you're putting in a lot of effort with them and a lot of work and you're learning, and even though it sucks when you lose, you're still winning a lot and gaining a lot of BP, then maybe that's just your team. And I would 100% ride with that team until the wheels fall off. 100%. I would not feel bad about using a team like that you love if it's considered to be meta. So again, it really does just depend on what you value in a Storm game. So just get out there, compile as much meta nonsense as you possibly can, and just try to enjoy the game. Meta can genuinely be the most beautiful or the most destructive thing in a Storm game. It is the sharpest double-edged blade I have ever had the misfortune to stand on either side of. The reason why a lot of people tend to look down on meta and tend to look at meta as a bad thing is because too many people get on this game with malicious and nefarious intent, and they just want to make another player's day as bad as they possibly can, and that actually gives them amusement and enjoyment. And it's people like that that unfortunately ruin the game for a lot of players. And that is not everybody, which is why I say what I say about meta. With that said, leave your favorite meta teams in the comments, and I will try my best to try them out in future videos and tag you. Anyways, I'll catch you all in the next one. Peace out. By the way, I hope you all really liked my microphone. It's a new microphone and I'm in love with it. I'm so in love with it. All right, peace out. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the notification bell because I will be uploading some live ranked videos this week. Peace. Again.